everyone, welcome to Perfect Smiles with me, Dr. Sarah Sadek, aka Dr. Gum Gums. Today's episode is a little bit different to normal because what I'm going to be doing is making some Italian biscotti with aniseed. Now these are absolutely delicious. I used to eat these a lot as a child. My grandmother used to make them and I found a fantastic recipe on the internet, so I thought I'd share it with everyone. They're guaranteed to please you, your family, and any loved ones you have that you want to share these with. They're absolutely delicious with a cup of tea, some coffee, an espresso, or even a glass of milk. So let's get going. I'll show you how to make these delicious Italian biscottis. As with most cakes and biscuits, these have dry ingredients and wet ingredients. I'm making quite a big portion. However, if you don't want to make a lot of biscuits, you might want to half the portion that I'm making today. The first thing that we start with is the eggs. I'm using 8 eggs. However, as I mentioned before, you can just use 4 if you don't want to produce quite a large batch of biscuits. From my experience, these biscuits don't last very long in the household, and even if you make a huge batch, they do keep for quite a long time. So it's up to you really how many you decide to make. If you have an oven, it's a good idea to get that switched on at the start, and you need to have it at 180 degrees just to get it nice and hot. So the first thing we do is mix the eggs together. A bit of eggshell there. Little tip, the best way for scooping up any eggshell fragments that accidentally get into your mixture is to use the eggshell itself. One, two, three, four, five, 6, 7, and 8 eggs. Right, I'm just gonna go and wash my hands because they're covered in eggs. The next thing we need to do is give our eggs a good whisk for about 1 minute until they're nice and light and frothy. So the next part involves adding the sugar, and I'm going to add 1.5 cups of sugar. Whenever I'm baking, I always use a cup like this, just kind of like a normal kind of sized mug, as my measure of cups when I'm baking. So 1.5 full cups of this. This is the sugar I'm using. I am using some very sort of fine brown sugar for this. One cup. And another cup. And now I'm going to whisk the eggs and the sugar for another minute or so. Now going to add the oil. You need 1 cup of vegetable oil. So again, I'm going to be using my trusted cup to measure this. And for this, I'm actually using some cold pressed rapeseed oil, but I think any vegetable oil would be fine. So let's get going. Looks like quite a lot of oil. Okay. And then we put the oil in. The oil goes in. Okay, now you also want to be adding about a teaspoon of vanilla extract. So I'm just using this Madagascar vanilla extract, and I'm using about a teaspoon of that, and it just adds a really nice flavour as well. Put that in. Okay, so the next part is really the fun part, because it's what makes this type of biscuit different to most other biscuits, which is adding the aniseed, or anise, as some people call it. So what I'm going to be using is the seed itself, and I picked these up while I was on holiday in Egypt. They smell amazing, they make great herbal drinks. So what you can do is actually, if you manage to get hold of the aniseed, which I think you can buy in a lot of sort of international shops, and what you can do is, if you want to make yourself this absolutely tasty herbal tea, is I just put a teaspoon of the aniseed into sort of like a deep pan, add some water on top, let it boil for a few minutes, and then you serve it up into your mug, add a little bit of honey, and it's absolutely delicious. I'm going to show you what the aniseed looks like in case you haven't actually seen it before. So that's what they look like. And I have just washed these seeds just to get them really nice and clean. I just washed them and I just left them to dry for a bit. Now what the next stage involves is grinding these up into a powder. I'm probably going to grind half of them into a powder and leave half of them full, and it just lets the taste explode in your biscuits. Absolutely delicious. If you don't have aniseed, you can add whatever seed you want or essence that you like. There's nothing to say you have to use these. If you just want to make plain biscuits, you can as well. So I've just ground up the aniseeds in this spice grinder, and I'm going to pop them into the rest of the mixture. I'm also going to add, as I mentioned before, some of the whole aniseeds in. Then I'm going to whisk all of this up again. Next part involves adding the flour mixture. So that's 4 cups of all-purpose flour and 4 teaspoons of baking powder. So I'm just using some plain flour for this. You then add 4 teaspoons of baking powder. And our final ingredient is just a little pinch of salt. I'm just going to sprinkle that on top. Perfect. Now I'm just using a spoon to mix it together to start with. And then I'll bring in the blender. Okay, so this is the sort of consistency you can expect your mixture to get to. It's quite thick. And you just want to make sure it's all mixed in really well. And that looks brilliant. Smells delicious. The next stage involves pouring the lovely mixture into a tray, which I have just covered in some baking paper, quite roughly. And I'm just going to pour it all in there and level it out. So it's all leveled out, and I'm going to pop this into the oven and leave it in there for about 25 minutes. It rises quite well, so I'm going to show you what it looks like in about 25 minutes. Okay, Okay, so the cake is out of the oven and it's got this really nice gold colour to it. It smells absolutely delicious. So the next step involves cutting this up into thin slices, and this part is probably the most time-consuming part of the whole thing. So let's get cutting to show you how this is done. Personally, I like to cut the slices quite thin because it means that they really get crispy in the oven. They taste much more delicious when they're crispy and dry. Some people do like to have these a little bit moist. Personally, I like to have them dry. Okay, and there we have it, all sliced up. So I've sliced everything up. The next stage involves separating these slices into trays to go back into the oven again. If you break a few of these, don't worry too much. Out like this. Got another tray here that I'm putting them all onto. Do with this tray here is I then start separating all the slices. And just look at those slices. So we can see just how perfectly baked these slices are. I'm really proud that these have turned out the way they have. It's exactly the sort of consistency you want. So you want them to look golden around the outside and then have that kind of creamy yellow colour in the inside. I know they're going to taste delicious. So I've pretty much completed this tray. I've got another couple of trays I'm going to use as well, so I just have to keep going until I've finished distributing all of the biscuits. Okay, so all the biscottis are laid out. Now it's time to put them all into the oven. Okay, they are out of the oven. Time for the taste test. Wow, it tastes really good. These would be perfect in the morning with a cup of tea or some cappuccino or just some milk. They are so good. Give them a go. See you again soon. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Take care. Bye bye.